¿qué tal? We are going to get started here with our RDA board meeting this afternoon. I don't know what time it is. We have a lot of general comments, and so I just want to go over a couple of things before we get started. First, I would appreciate if we'll be giving everyone 2 minutes to speak, and I would appreciate if we can remember that we're all here to listen and be respectful of one another. One of the things that happens when we cheer, jeer, clap, snap, or make sort of any of these comments is that it makes it difficult for us as board members to hear what the person who is speaking is trying to say. And the point of having general comments is to make sure that we as a board are listening and able to hear the comments that our constituents want to give to us. So if I could please just ask everyone to be respectful as we move forward with our general comment period. And then, like I said, what I will like to do is when I call your name, if you just want to step up to the table, pick a microphone, and we will begin your 2 minutes when you get up to the table. I'm going to read 2 names at a time so that the second person can be prepared like you're on deck to come on up and give us your words and your comments. There's also overflow in the other room. Oh, yes, thank you. There is overflow in the formal council meeting room, which is across the hall. And we actually had this set up because I saw them setting up. Can I invite the extra comments for our video camera? Yeah. We also have in the breezeway right out here that goes out into the balcony, we have set up a video camera, so if 2 minutes is not enough and you would like to continue your comments, please head out that way, and we have an intern and some staff members out there. If you do not want to make a public oral comment, please email us. You can write it on the card and simply give it to one of our staff members, and so we're here to accommodate. There's water out in the hallway as well, if you get thirsty. Okay, we are going to get started. So I have Stephen McCurdy, and on deck will be Paul Christensen.
Go ahead. My name is Steve McCurdy. I'm here representing the over 3,600, I believe, people who have signed the petition to save the Utah Theater. I'm going to read some of the comments that have been sent to me. A most worthy cause, how we treat our local architecture demonstrates our respect and esteem for those who have come before. Let's save this theater. Angela Stevens says, old theaters such as this are gems that are meant to be restored and treasured. Ellie Sargent says, so much of our architectural heritage in Salt Lake City is gone. We need to save the remaining treasures we have. A building with this kind of craftsmanship will never be built again. Paul Gibbs, this theater was a second home to my family and me, and it's an important part of Utah's cultural history. Jennifer Billingsley, we continue to destroy history for new skyrises. Then we lament the loss of the beauty in architecture. This is a historic site and deserves to be preserved. Julie Ulstad, this is a gorgeous historical treasure that still has so much value to the community. Please preserve it and protect it. Susan Johansson, too much of our historic legacy is thoughtlessly thrown away. Historic preservation is important. David Condi, this theater has a lot of memories from my youth. Rather than destroy our history just to build further into the sky, let's preserve and maintain our history. David Berg, we've already lost far too many historic buildings and theaters such as the Orpheum in Salt Lake City. It's time for the mayor and the Salt Lake City Council to start taking historic preservation seriously and make it a priority. It's time to save this irreplaceable Salt Lake City treasure. Kirk Walton, I don't want to see another landmark destroyed. Helen Peterson, this is a very important building because its architecture and its history. I have a picture of my mother walking by it in the 1940s. It's very sentimental to me. Carol McDonough, preserving architectural heritage is something that cannot be delayed.
Time.
Once gone, there is no redemption. I have hundreds more, and I'd like to share the signatures with you. Thank you.
Do you want to?
Yeah. Thank you.
After Paul Christensen, I have Darby McDonovan.
Thank you. My name is Paul Christensen. I live at 1831 Connor Street in District 6, and I own several properties downtown. I'm here to speak today in favor of the Utah Theater being redeveloped. As our downtown has unfolded over the past few years, one of the things that's been missing is significant multifamily properties where people can rent, particularly in a high-rise such as the one that's being proposed. This will allow people to live downtown, making it far more of a 24/7 environment than what we have right now, which is what the next step our downtown needs. Particularly important is the way that this project covers all types of properties from more affordable to higher end, which is another aspect that is much needed in our downtown. Let me just speak for a minute about the Utah Theater. I went there as a child. If memory serves me right, I think I saw Fantasia there. However, I take comfort in knowing that the Capitol Theater on the same block has been preserved. Also, when I look at the economics, I just don't see how that makes sense for our city government to be spending that kind of money on a rehabilitation project of that. So in closing, I hope that the RDA will support the redevelopment of the inner block where the Utah Theater is right now. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Darby McDonovan, and then Pete Ashdown.
Hi, thanks for the opportunity to speak. My name's Darby McDonough, and I just found out about this, the state of this property about 2 weeks ago. My first job was at the Capitol Theater, which unfortunately has been torn down and is a 70-millimeter screen. From my understanding, the Utah Theater could be a downtown 70-millimeter screen. The Capitol Theater doesn't have a 70-millimeter screen. I'd like to, I'm a little unsure about how much time I'll have here, but two things. Over the past 2 weeks, I found that there's a lot of youth, 18 to 29, who are really invested in architectural history, and we're sitting in a building right now that was saved, that was almost torn down also. It's really invigorating for me to see the young people caring about this. Also, there's a lot of space downtown. We can build multifamily housing a block down the street. It doesn't have to be the Utah Theater. This is a letter that my friend David Mickey Evans, who's the director and writer of The Sandlot, wrote, and I'd like to read portions of this. As the writer-director of the Sandlot movie, which I was fortunate to film in downtown areas of Salt Lake City in 1992, sorry. I know I couldn't have done it without historical spaces and locations that supported my vision. As the cast and I have come back to celebrate the film in its original locations, I have looked forward to meeting Salt Lake City natives and passionate local film lovers that love their city and the unique history film has within it. Salt Lake has a special place in film history in large part because of the historical spaces that celebrate the past while also looking to the future. When I heard the former Pantages and now Utah Theater might be torn down and then saw the photos of what the inside of the theater looks like, I was stunned. We have restored and saved many of these theaters in Los Angeles to great success, and they create unique and special moments for audiences and performers. When I found out the Utah Theater would be the last standing 70-millimeter screen in downtown Salt Lake, I wondered why anyone would want to tear down such a space. I'm grateful my film, The Sandlot, has maintained and grown an audience over the years. I expect the cast and I will be back again to Utah for screenings. Thanks.
Thank you. After Pete Ashdown, I have Lisa Alcott.
Thank you for hearing me today. My name is Pete Ashdown. My company is X-Mission. Two council members asked me in the last meeting to show public support for preserving the theater. We have done that. You have heard from us. Nearly 3,600 people have signed a petition in 3 weeks. Many of us are here today. I want to relate some of the facts I found in the last month and a half in doing this. The Tacoma Pantages, which has a larger surrounding building than what Utah Theater has, was restored with seismic upgrades. They have earthquakes in Seattle as well, for $24.3 million. The Minneapolis Pantages, also an identical theater, was restored for $8 million. I think the $60 million figure that's being bandied about is inflated. Two former high-level county officials expressed their disappointment to me that the Utah Film and Media Center at the Utah Theater wasn't brought to reality, due to Salt Lake City Council deciding it wasn't restorative enough. Stan Penfold did not like the plan that was presented. The county was ready to manage the facility in conjunction with the nonprofits and had budget to do so. Mayor Wilson, in conversation with me yesterday, says she welcomes pausing this process so the county and the city can look at possibilities for rehabilitating the theater. The idea that the lack of parking for a downtown theater is a reason to demolish it is flabbergasting. Either we embrace mass transit to downtown or we don't. Either we decide to attack air quality head on or we accept the status quo. I have housed my business downtown for 26 years by choice. The seeds of X Mission planted has brought other tech businesses downtown. I do not want to see downtown I have worked for without any city support turned into parking garages and empty luxury condominiums. A major philanthropic donor in Salt Lake City has spoken to me favorably about working to restore the Utah Theater, if Utah Film Center and Preservation Utah are on board with it. Those organizations are here today to express their support for preservation. Mayor Biskupski has doomed this theater without public hearings, public input, or RFPs. Please do not be complicit in her actions. You are a counterbalance to the mayor. Thank you.
After Lisa Alcott, I have Michael Valentine, I believe that says.
Hi, I'm Lisa Alcott. I'm a past board member of the Utah Film Center, and I was actually involved in the Salt Lake County study 5 years ago. That proposal was rejected by the RDA staff as being flawed, which I would like to hear the explanation for that. It was not flawed. It was a different proposal. This city has changed in 5 years. Mass transit, all these things that people have brought up behind me. We're not the same city we were when that proposal was put together, and I think this deserves more public input. We've asked for none. Yes, we posted whatever the required postings, but there have been efforts in this city for other ventures like the cop shop where it was shopped around at the community councils, even though there was already a decision made. At least we attempted to get some community input. In the last 5 years, you've gotten no community input. Most citizens have never been in that theater, and it is a compelling tour. And I am asking you, I know this isn't your job as RDA, but we are not giving up on this, and we are going to continue to pursue this.
After Michael Valentine, I have Daniel Steiner.
Okay. Hi, my name is Michael. I'm a filmmaker and activist here in Salt Lake. I live about a block away. As a filmmaker, I want to speak about the film aspects about this. I don't know if the RDA notices this. I'm sure you guys have gotten some input on theater. But if restored, this would be one of the greatest cinema screens in the country, easily, if not the world. It's 101 years old. They don't make theaters like this anymore. It's 2,300 seats. It would be a shame to tear this down, and it's something that Salt Lake and Utah wouldn't recover from for decades, artistically and creatively. There's lots of talks about the theater not being profitable, when across the street the Eccles cost $200 million, which is almost more than three times what plans of the Pantages have been said to cost. I think this is crazy when in 2019, Sundance brought $180 million to Utah. So it would be a huge shame to not save this theater in terms of the artistic legacy, to the Utah history. Next to California and New York, Utah's got one of the most incredible film histories here with Monument Valley, John Ford directing films here at the Sandlot. I'm sure all you members on the council here have a favorite film. Most likely, a lot of them were shot in Utah and have history in Utah. So it's something we need to protect. We need to rebuild this theater, not only for the history, for the architecture standpoint, but also for the future of film and for the future of film in Utah. Like, there's can be so many great filmmakers come out of Salt Lake, and we need to support them. We need to have a space for them to show movies, for the world to come see movies here, and to support the greatest film festival we already have. So that'd be an extension of this. Thank you.
After Daniel, I have David Ammett.
My name is Daniel Steiner. I'm a 24-year-old film student at University of Utah. This is my first time ever being at any meeting like this. This is very out of my comfort zone. But I love the history of Utah. And I often will take my friends downtown and we'll take a tour of the city and I'll show them some of the historic points, and we always stop at this theater. And I know for a fact that there are so many people that are my same demographic, my same age, that are interested in the film history of Utah. There's a theater a block away, formerly known as the Rialto Theater, that just got the green light to be remodeled and gutted. The current company there is getting kicked out. And if we keep tearing out the culture and the art history of this city, then no one will want to live in those buildings that we put on that spot. Thank you.
After David, I have Casey O'Brien McDonough.
Hello, good afternoon. My name is David Ammett, and I am here representing Preservation Utah, its board and its constituency. And this is a constituency that has reached out to me in various ways over the past several weeks and made their opinion loud and clear about the Utah Theater. They want to see it saved. A lot of them ask why there hasn't been a public process in regards to deciding the fate of the Utah Theater. And I tell them that there was a public process put in place last year. It involved Preservation Utah, the RDA, and also Downtown Rising. We were going to start a survey with a series of tours hosted by Preservation Utah, and then it would be followed by this survey, which would last several weeks, that would poll the residents of Salt Lake and ask their opinion about the fate of the theater. This effort was undermined. The rug was pulled out from underneath it by the RDA a few weeks before the survey was set to launch. I would like the RDA to explain why that occurred, even in this meeting. The second point I want to make, I'm going to read directly from a letter that I'll send you in the next few days. In the RDA board meetings held over the last several months, it has been suggested that the Utah Theater's character-defining features, fragments of decorative plasterwork or stained glass, will be removed from the theater and incorporated into the new Main Street skyscraper. The value of this spolia will be factored into the amount that Hines and LaSalle will pay, or rather not pay, to gain ownership of the Utah Theater site. It has also been suggested that Preservation Utah will advise the removal of these fragments in an effort to preserve the Utah Theater's architectural and social historical legacy. Like most other preservation and architectural organizations, Preservation Utah believes that all of the historic and much of the aesthetic value of a building's ornamentation is destroyed once it is removed from its original context. Removing fragments of the Utah Theater and incorporating these same fragments into a new building will not, in our opinion, serve to honor the Utah Theater's history. We feel that incorporating these fragments into a new building will actually be detrimental to the new building, as it will destroy the shock of the new that you have promised the new building will deliver to Salt Lake. Thank you.
After Casey, I have Josh Sherman.
Hello, everybody. You may have seen some of my emails. I keep trying to make them short, but I keep sending out very long ones. I work in architecture. I work in the Walker Center. I helped the current owners of that building get it on the National Register and add the signage tower back at the top. So I'm familiar with the theater for that reason and many others. Having worked in architecture, I've been on both sides of the table. I've sat in the developer's side, and I've sat on, we'll say, the advocate's side for losing something historic. So as I read through all the RDA memos and everything from the developers, I keep trying to keep an open mind to the arguments, to be an optimist and a realist at the same time. But I keep feeling like the process has been driven by a priority list with the theater at the bottom or somewhere lower in that list, and with all of the other priorities at the top, which makes perfect sense, right? That makes sense if you're a developer. If this was a private piece of land, there would be no question. That was, they would make the decisions based on those facts and move forward. But I believe the theater was bought with the intent of the city and with the support of the residents to save the theater. And I think there's still so many ways to find a way to save it that will benefit the city, and even possible ways to also benefit Hines and their adjacent property, and to benefit LaSalle and their, I think, desire to have a restaurant in this new development. I just think it just feels to me like the process has been driven by a narrative that is asking questions about why we can't do this, what's another reason we can't, versus reasons of how are we going to find the way. We need to make sure everybody's had their input. We need to make sure the county isn't interested. And as we research it further, we find that all those questions haven't been asked. So I encourage you to do whatever you can to save the theater. So thanks, you guys.
After Josh, I have Carol McDonough.
Hello, RDA Board. Good morning, afternoon. Thank you for the citizens who are also coming. My name is Josh Sherman. I'm a local artist and advocate for the communities. Just want to make a couple quick points, and this will be very easy to, I think, clarify the problem at hand. RDA, if we read the actual statement here, says they work to revitalize neighborhoods, commercial districts that experience disinvestment. Granary is a very good proponent of this. We did a mural engagement with the city. They paid us $150,000 and we got 10 murals. Maybe not because of that, but industry has came up from Denver and bought 13 blocks. That's a lot of money going into our pockets. The general fund from 2017 was $260 million. Last year was $301 million. That's an increase of $40 million. There is also 5 skyscrapers going up in the near future within the next 4 years. To add one more would be a neat-looking skyline, but it doesn't mean that we don't have the money to preserve history and arts. 12% of the employment of Utah comes from arts, culture, recreation. When we lost outdoor retailers, that was $40 million we lost. We assume that Sundance might stay here. Maybe Sundance does not stay here. We thought outdoor retailers would stay here. We lost that, and even though our recreation brings in $1 billion, we lost it for lobbyist reasons. And finally, this is our money. This is tax dollars. You guys are the dolers of this fund, but the ZAP program, which the citizens unanimously pass every single year, goes to zoos, arts, parks, and arts. We care about art. It is revitalizing our city, and as we grow, we also need to keep preservation at the top of that list. Thank you for your time.
After Carol, I have Karen Horn.
I'm Carol McDonough, also known as Casey's mom and Darby's mom and Quinn's mom. When I was a little girl growing up in Minidoka County, Idaho, my mother would tell stories of growing up in Salt Lake and how on Saturday she would go to the Pantages Vaudeville and see Bob Hope and Amos and Andy and Babe Ruth and Sammy Davis, and then afterwards there'd be a spelling bee. And then she would say, and on either side of the stage, there were fire hose holders that said Pantages Theater. And she always put her arm in the arch of Pantages Theater. When they closed the Utah Theater, my husband and I went down, and the manager was kind enough to take us on a tour of the building. And there in the basement were 4 fire hose holders that said Pantages Theater. I told him the story, and he said, well, do you want to buy them? And I said, yeah, I want to buy them. He said, well, I need to keep one. So I have 3 of those that have spent the last, 30 years in my basement. The lamp came from the hall that went down to the lobby from the street. My husband's aunt said that when they closed the Pantages and made it into, or the Orpheum actually, and made it into the Utah Theater, they didn't want a lot of this stuff, and they had all of the employees come down and take what they wanted. And she had taken this lamp home and also had discovered there were miles of sheeting that had been used as backdrops. And she took it home and cut it up and hemmed it and said she never had to buy sheets again. So my kids, I had no idea they had grown up looking at these things and developing a love for them and the stories. And if the Utah Theater is restored, I promise I will donate the fire hose holders back to put on either side of the stage. In our home, it was always the Pantages Theater. It was never the Utah. We talked about the Pantages and how my husband's uncle was the first stage carpenter, and the other uncle was the first stage manager. So the idea of that being a valuable space, once we lose our architectural heritage, it is gone forever. Please, please save the Utah.
Thank you. After Karen, excuse me, I have Polly Hart. And just before you start, Karen, after Polly, I have Don Borchardt, and that's the last 3 cards I have, so if there's anyone else out there that wants to speak, just raise your hand or go fill out a card and we'll get to you, okay? Oh, we have a couple more over here. Never mind.
3 more.
3 more. It's all you, Karen.
Hello, I'm Karen Horn. I'm a local artist, and I thank the RDA for this opportunity to speak with you. I was actually fortunate to be awarded the 2013 Mayor's Visual Artist Award, and that came to me chiefly for my series celebrating downtown Salt Lake City landmarks, including the Capitol Theater, the Crane Building, the City County here, Bravenel, Rose Wagner, and other downtown buildings. I have loved celebrating our city. And I have to relay to you that in openings and any interaction I've had with the public about these paintings, they always approach me and say, oh, I have so many wonderful memories of bringing my family to the Capitol Theater. We love the lobby. We love the historical character. We love the ambiance of that theater. I also have painted the new Eccles Theater, but I have to say that the only feedback I have on that, for all its wonderful amenities and stage equipment and the nice auditorium, everyone says it's cold like an airport. And so I am concerned that, as someone very interested in local theaters, for some reason I totally miss this Utah Theater. I have never had the opportunity to tour it. I'm afraid the public process has not existed or has been under the radar. And I implore the board, the mayor, and the city council to pause the process and call for a public feedback. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Polly Hart. Most of you know me, and I had the honor of, I think, being the longest serving member of the RAC, the RDA Advisory Committee. I served 10 years on it. Redevelopment agencies exist to foster redevelopment when the market would not otherwise bear it. Obviously, you know that because you're here. Redevelopment includes restoring buildings that have unique qualities that are valued and not replaceable, meaning RDAs exist in part to save historic properties that may not offer the highest dollar return, but offer an asset that is priceless. You cannot put a price on this place. And it is a disservice to our tourism and our downtown economy to lose a treasure that we will never regain. Please remember that RDAs do not exist only to foster new construction, and earning the almighty dollar is not always the highest and best use. As a closing statement, I just want to ask you to remember what the original Penn Station in New York looked like. You will find it in every single art history book and architectural history book of American architecture. It was killed by redevelopment and now is replaced with a new Penn Station and Madison Square Garden that are considered two of the most hideous buildings in New York City. That was one way you can use the RDA. Please do not do that in this case. This is a treasure. Thank you.
Thank you. After Don, I have Kimber Pino.
Hi, my name is Dawn Borcher, and I work in film festivals around the country. So I worked in many, many, many theaters. I just wanted to say that people connect to theaters with history and character. The most famous cinema in this country is Chinese Grauman Theater. That is a beautiful cinema palace. people do not connect to sterile cinemaplexes. It is not a place that people can come and really have that beautiful cinema communal experience. There is a resurgence in cinema and 70 millimeter like was presented earlier. So I think that this would be valuable to our city. I'm originally from Milwaukee, Wisconsin, where we have the historic Oriental Theater, and that theater visually is synonymous with Milwaukee. People come in from all over the country to see the historic value of that theater, and I think that that is priceless, and I think that this is absolutely worth saving.
After Kimber, I have Jeff Thompson.
Hi, I'm Kimber. Thank you for listening to me today, taking the time. I've grown up in Utah. I live in Sugar House. And I remember coming up to Salt Lake and going to events here and experiencing the beautiful architecture that we have here in the buildings that make those events that much more of an event. And you almost remember the building that you were in, the experience when you walk in, more than sometimes what you went there for. Since then, I've been inspired to go into design, and now I'm an interior designer, and I work on residential and commercial buildings in and around Salt Lake. So I'm part of the redevelopment and the growth of Utah, and I'm proud of that. But I think that with that comes a responsibility to take pause and to look at the buildings that we do have and try to preserve them. I've spoken to department heads in the architecture and design departments at the U of U, this Utah State, LDS Business College, BYU, and Weber State all have expressed their desire to keep the theater because it is a huge asset to learning about architecture and about design and about history, and it really matters to all the hundreds of students that they see come and go through their doors. I would just hope that we take pause here and try to save the theater, and like others that have talked before me, looking at the ways that we can save it and not more reasons why we can't. Also, another thing to echo about Penn Station, it was the building that died to save the rest for New York. And from there, they had a act that went into preserving all of their other buildings that actually saved Grand Central. Thank you.
After Jeff, I have Brent Barnett. I think.
My name is Jeff Thompson. I'm a former archivist at 20th Century Fox in Los Angeles and a film historian. The Utah Theater is one of the three most important film venues in Salt Lake during the 20th century. Salt Lake City is very committed to the arts with Bravenel Hall, Ballet West, opera, supporting the Tabernacle Choir and Orchestra. Why aren't we committed to film? Why don't we have a world-class film venue since we're known as the location of the top film festival in the world? Renovated theaters are very economically feasible and very profitable. There are over 600 renovated theaters across the United States. In our own state, the Ellen Eccles Theater in Logan, the Egyptian Theater in Ogden, the Egyptian Theater in Park City, and Capitol Theater are proof that these can be renovated and made very profitable. Most importantly, this theater was bought with public money and with the promise that it would be renovated as a film venue. It seems like all the dealings and decisions have been behind closed doors, and I think the public should be in on the decision of what happens with this property. Very few people are benefited by a high-rise condo and an expensive restaurant, even if there are a dozen low-income rental units. There are plenty of empty lots in this city that could be taken by eminent domain if the city feels this is really important, right across from tracks on 4th South, over by the Triad Center. Once you destroy this, there's no way to replace it. We should show our commitment to film by saving the Utah Theater. Thank you.
After Brent, I have Robert Stefanik.
Council members, thanks for listening to me. I'm Brent Barnett. I love theaters. I love downtowns. This space is a fantastic space. The interior is out of this world. My grandmother went to this theater as a child in the 20s. She played on the floor. Her parents watched vaudeville, which she did not understand. Sometimes they had to cover her ears. The cost of renovation of this facility has been completely misstated. It is a farce if this is not better analyzed. But mostly, this decision is about vision. This is the vision of this city, not today, but in 10 to 20 years. We have a few theaters, not nearly as many as we once had. We are growing. We are growing. Where is the vision? Main Street needs great public spaces. We need more than a collection of theaters. We need a theater district, a la Times Square. So this is not about a single theater. It should be about a fantastic theater district. Our new mayor should have this vision. Our new mayor should make this a key piece of our city and make a clear, thorough plan for a grand theater district that we can all love in our beloved city. Thank you.
Robert is the last card that I have. If there is anyone that wants to speak, raise your hand and we'll have a staff member come over to you. Thank you.
Hello, thank you for listening to me. First off, I'm from another state. I am only 27, and I look at this as a way to preserve history and what it can become as a theater itself. We can use it for film premieres for new films. We can actually become a spot for big theaters. A lot of celebrities go to these theaters for their film premieres. Why not Salt Lake? Also, on weekends, why don't we have like a flashback event, like where you can do like a classic film from the days when the man that was just before me was talking about. We can also have live acts. We can do so much with this theater. It's beautiful inside. It's designed for both live action and film. Why not do it? We should be saving this theater, not destroying it. And if we do, I can tell you right now, you're going to repeat what state I left. And they are suffering because they don't have a theater district. They don't have historical means to protect anything.
Thank you. And sir, if you want to come on up and then just tell us your name is after this gentleman. Okay. If you'll just state your name for us so we know. And then after you, sir, we have George Phillips.
My name is David Berg. One of my earliest memories is being brought to the city-county building, the abandoned city-county building that was fenced off and empty, and there was still talk of knocking it down. The arguments were the same to knock down this very building we're in by those who stood to profit financially then, as the arguments by those who stand to make a profit off the destruction of this irreplaceable jewel today. And I don't think you'll find anyone these days who will regret that we fought to say that we saved this building and this irreplaceable jewel. The Utah Pantages Theater was purchased at a time when the real estate market was at rock bottom in the middle of a recession for $5.5 million. And for the express purpose of being restored, but now is being sold at significant loss 10 years later at the height of a real estate bubble with essentially no public process, at a proposed price less than the worth of the Tiffany chandelier and marble flooring inside the theater alone. The RDA City Council needs to reject the proposed sale immediately on the basis of the corporate handout giveaway low price that is, and then open the process and restoration to the public, something that's not been done thus far. Luxury condos can be built elsewhere downtown, and we only have this one last historic theater on our main street. Please honor your commitment to the public and save the jewel of Main Street. Please save the Utah Theater and follow the example of Tacoma and St. Paul that have identical sister theaters to the Pantages. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is George Phillips. I didn't come here today with the intention of saying anything, but sometimes my mouth runs away with me. I was there 10 years ago when the city acquired this theater. I let the city have it. I was going to buy it. The city bought it with the intention of restoring it. I would have restored it. It would not be in the shape that it is in today if I had purchased it back then. But I thought at the time that Salt Lake City, being the city that it is, having the heritage that it has, having restored this building, that they would do the same with that building. I am disappointed that this discussion is still going on 10 years later. I hope that you can reaffirm my faith in individuals, in city government, and in people, because that building needs to be restored and preserved for future generations. It is the last building of its kind in this town. I've left. I don't live here anymore. But I can tell you that if that building is destroyed, you will destroy a part of yourselves. I've been involved in historical preservation and restoration my entire life, and I can tell you this. This is what you're throwing away. You're throwing away your history, your heritage, everything that really matters. You're throwing away a part of yourselves. And if you do, shame on you.
I have no further comment cards. Again, if anybody wants to say something, please just raise your hand and come on up. Otherwise, come on up and just state your name, please.
Hi, my name is Heather Armstrong, and I did not come with any prepared statement. I'm a local author, and I am the original mommy blogger, so you can take me very seriously. I am going to admit my ignorance, that I had no idea that there was such a thing as the Utah Theater. And I am appalled that this is going forward when I know that there are so many more like me in this city who have no idea that this exists, have never even been inside to see the treasure that it is. And this has gone on in secrecy. And the fact that we would be losing such an amazing jewel of the city, a treasure, and so many of us don't even know. It's like going to the Louvre and taking a Michelangelo off the wall and knocking a hole in the wall and going, look at the beautiful hole that we made. You're leaving a hole in this city. Please open this up for the public to see. Thank you.
Okay. If there is nothing else, then this will conclude our general comment period. I want to thank everyone for your comments, and particularly, as always, I want to thank everyone for being respectful with one another as we were able to listen to your comments. If you have further comments, or if there were people who did not feel comfortable getting up and speaking in front of us, please feel free to reach out. You can contact any one of us. You can email our comments, email, or simply email one of us or contact any of us directly. So thank you again, and we are going to move on to the next item of our agenda. With that, our next agenda item is our budget amendment number 1. And at the table, I have Mr. Danny Walls. And Ben. And Mary Beth. If she wants to. And Callie. I'm just going to keep naming people.
There is a draft motion sheet for board members to consider in the packet.
The motion sheet includes a contingent appropriation related to the $750,000 additional funding for a new track station at 650 South Main Street. The board already appropriated $639,000 for this back in April. This would be an additional $750,000. It would not fully fund the project, but it would be most of the funding. Adjacent property owners are expected to contribute some of that additional funding to get to the $2 million. The funding contingency, and I'll read it for those that don't have it in front of you. It reads, the funding is contingent upon reporting finalized designs and cost estimates to the board. It could be more or less than the $2 million current estimate. Providing a plan to fully fund the project, including commitments from third parties other than the RDA, and an agreement with UTA in which UTA commits to operate and maintain the station. UTA has already verbally committed to maintaining and operating, but this would be formalizing that into a written agreement. The $639,000 the board appropriated in April is sufficient to continue the design of the station, so none of these contingencies would slow down the project. It would simply add a step for more information to come back to the board, as well as confirming the funding plan. One other change since the last briefing on this budget amendment, the administration is requesting an additional $500,000 from the revolving loan fund balance be included, and this is related to the loan for the Jefferson, which is on the agenda later today.
Okay. Ben, I'm going to interrupt real quick and make sure I get this right with Jen. So, board members, we actually scheduled the public hearing for this budget amendment. We noticed it for 2 p.m. And as you can see, it's only 1 p.m. because we started early because of the council agenda. So we're going to talk about this, not take action yet. We're going to recess as an RDA board at some point, convene as the city council board, and then reconvene as the RDA board for the public hearing after 2 o'clock so that we stay on all of our notices. So just an FYI, this is simply the briefing. We will take action or likely take action after the public hearing later this afternoon. Did I get all that right?
Yep.
Phew.
And if you're going, you can obviously do it then.
Okay.
That was all that I was going to say. If there are any questions on the contingencies or the budget amendment, Danny and I are here to help answer. Otherwise, we could proceed to the next item.
Board members, do you have any questions on the budget amendment? Great. We'll go to the next item, which we're actually switching up the agenda a little bit because I don't know that there's been an RDA meeting that I haven't switched up the agenda a little bit. So why stop now? We're going to move to the Utah Theater redevelopment follow-up. So we have Ben and Danny and Tammy at the table, please.
How do you do the presentation mode? Normally that works. We'll just have to scroll through. So it's a PDF, so we'll have to scroll through.
No, you can't. So, the council agenda.
So you're going to do the shift at there's no extra on this, right, today?
Hi, go ahead.
All right.
Start away.
Ben, did you have anything you wanted to tee up first, or you want me to go into?
Just a quick intro. There's a summary of the required public benefits on the first page of the staff report. These are the low-income apartments with a 50-year affordability term, the mid-block walkway, and reuse of historic elements. There are also 4 policy questions for the board to consider about which public benefits are required versus optional, and if this is supported by the board or if you'd prefer switching some. There's also a question about the width and the length of the walkway. What additional support
could look like for the project and what public benefits the board would prioritize for any additional support from the RDA or the city. And then there's also a question about documenting the historic features and hiring an outside consultant, potentially an item that could be included in the next budget amendment for the RDA if the board is interested. The RDA staff has a presentation, and then there'll be time for questions afterward.
Thank you.
Okay. Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the board. Thank you very much for the opportunity to present this today. The item before you today is a discussion on the proposed resolution to determine the purchase price for the property that is the Utah Theater in consideration for a potential write-down in light of the required public benefits that have been included in the purchase and sale agreement for the property disposition that has been executed by the administration. The agreement provides the ability for the developer to request the write-down from the board to take into consideration the restrictive easements that will be recorded against the property that Ben referred to. Our purpose here today is to provide information on the project once again, to discuss the costs related to those public benefits, as well as to follow up on some of the previous conversations and discussions that have happened at the last two board meetings. So given that, I will turn it over to Tammy for our presentation of information within the packet, and then we're happy to answer any questions you have.
Great, thanks, Danny. So I will provide a brief background on the project and a kind of a status update as to where we're at today. So back in 2010, it was January of 2010 actually, that the RDA acquired the property. And between 2010 and about 2016, we did a lot of research on the property. We held an open house on site. There was the film center study. We did other internal studies calculating seismic costs, structural costs, looking at various reuse plans on the property. And in 2015, it was actually late 2015, the RDA at that point decided to start negotiating with the adjacent property owners because it came to light that there were some significant redevelopment barriers to the site. So in 2015, we started to engage LaSalle and Hines, which are the adjacent property owners. I think we all know the site is a prominent location on Main Street. It's about 0.89 acres. And in May of this year, we had an appraisal done, and it appraised at $4,070,000. Here's a map of the site with the adjacent property owners that the RDA is exclusively negotiating with. So the Kearns building is owned partially by Hines and 160 Main by LaSalle. So just a brief overview of the project. What is being proposed on the site is a mixed-use tower with publicly accessible open space, public art, about 300 residential units, structured parking that actually might be shared with the Kearns building, commercial space, Main Street activation, incorporation of pedestrian amenities, ground floor retail, and dining options. Here is a conceptual rendering of what the project is proposed to look like at this point in time. The tower there, and here's a shot from Main Street, plenty of Main Street activation with the mid-block to the north of the property. So the way the current proposed project is structured, there are 3 public benefits that are tied to the proposed land write-down. That would be affordable housing, so a minimum of 10% of the units would be affordable to households earning between 60 and 80% AMI, a mid-block walkway to the north of the site, providing pedestrian amenities and connection to the interior of the block, and then historic repurposing of theater elements to pay homage to the former use of the site. Here's a closer-up view of the proposed mid-block walkway leading west. We have also negotiated with the adjacent property owners additional optional public benefits that would be contingent on further discussions, further analysis by the adjacent property owners, and then additional RDA incentives. And those 3 optional benefits are additional affordable housing above and beyond the 10% that would be required, nonprofit office space at the first floor and second floor of the project is currently contemplated as retail and office, and so potentially setting aside some of the space for a nonprofit organization, and then additional publicly accessible open space in addition to the mid-block. So it would be a park space atop the parking garage. So looking closely at the park space and determining what level of public access and improvements would be incorporated into that park space. Here's a rendering of the open space as it's currently contemplated. And we have also done an analysis of what the 3 required benefits, what the costs associated with those public benefits would be. And the total cost associated is between 5.7 and 7 million, sorry. So the affordable housing is coming in at about $4 million for the 10% of the affordable units. The mid-block walkway, depending on the final size and configuration, is estimated to be between $575,000 and $1.8 million. And then we have negotiated with the adjacent property owners to allocate up to $1 million for historic repurposing and incorporation of those elements into the new project. So next steps, if the board approves the land write-down, it will give the adjacent property owners the assurance to move forward with the next steps in the development process, really finalizing the plan and configuration, and really looking at the optional public benefits and working with the RDA to determine whether additional RDA participation is needed to implement those additional public benefits. And then as Danny spoke about, we would incorporate a design review process, restricted covenants, and a mid-block walkway easement before the property is sold to make sure that those public benefits are indeed implemented. And then we do have some follow-up information based on previous discussions with the board. I think it was the last meeting, the question of historic tax credits came up, and whether or not the theater was eligible for historic tax credits. And in one clarifying point, in 2017, federal tax reform removed the 10% historic tax credit option, so there's only the 20% option available. And we have been advised in the past by 2 different primary sources that the site is not eligible for listing on the historic register and therefore eligible for the 20% tax credits. The first one of those sources was the Utah Heritage Foundation, now Preservation Utah. In 2013, their position statement provided to the RDA stated that due to irreversible and unfortunate major alterations by previous owners, the building is not eligible for the National Register of Historic Places. And then also the 2014 film study said that the site is not eligible for listing on either the Salt Lake City Register of Cultural Resources or the National Register of Historic Places because the site lacks the overall historic integrity required for formal designation.
Sorry, Tammy, I'm going to interrupt you. I was getting my phone charged, and so I didn't, where was that information provided from to us by whom?
The first statement was from the Utah Heritage Foundation, and the full quote from their position statement is in the board packet. And the second one was from the film study, and that quote is in your board packet as well.
Thank you.
That is not true.
I would, we had time, I'm sorry, we had time for public comment, and everyone was very respectful during comments. I would ask that we continue being respectful to the people presenting at this time. I'm happy to talk with people afterwards regarding that and feelings on that, but I'd ask that we be respectful of people giving a presentation.
So that was the information that the RDA was provided that we had been working off of. So there are 2 ways that a property can be eligible for tax credits, and that is being listed on the National Register or being included in a National Historic District. So the next slide is a map of where our historic districts are. So in speaking with preservation experts, one opportunity to have the property eligible for tax credits would be to expand one of the historic districts, neighboring historic districts. But the historic district would have to, the theater would have to uphold the intent of the historic district. So for example, you couldn't really expand the warehouse district because it would have to be a warehouse to qualify as a contributing property. But there are potentially other districts that could be expanded. And then another opportunity where the property could be eligible for tax credits or if a rehabilitation was fully funded up front, retroactively, the theater then might be eligible to be put on the National Register and then be eligible for tax credits. But you would have to upfront the cost of the rehab with no guarantee of the tax credits actually coming through. Oops. Oh. Sorry, I'm scrolling. I don't know what's wrong with this. Okay, bonding capacity. We also looked into bonding capacity, which is a question that came up in the last meeting, and it was in November of 2017 that the RDA's financial advisors looked at bonding capacity of each project area that the RDA has, and within the CBD, there's about $3.5 million of available tax increment funds to potentially be available for debt service, and that would equate to about a $45 million bond. So that is a potential that could be used for restoration of the theater, but that would take essentially all of the remaining tax increments through the sunsetting of the CBD, which is in 2040. And then we also looked at kind of an affordable housing comparison, looking at the incentive that is proposed for the Utah Theater project in comparison to other affordable housing projects that the RDA has and the city has put funds into recently. So this is just a sampling. And the per unit subsidy, if you will, for these various projects ranges in size from $5,000 per unit to upwards of almost $90,000, which is what the RDA incentivized paper box lofts for. But it's important to remember that most of the projects that the RDA or the city puts affordable housing dollars in, they're also receiving low-income housing tax credits and other sources of public money, such as Olin Walker Housing Loan Fund and other sources. But with paper box and with the proposed Utah Theater write-down, this would be essentially the only source of affordable housing subsidy. So that's why the per unit dollar amount is higher on those two. There is additional information that the board did inquire about in your packet on new market tax credits and other potential sources of funding, but I think these were the ones that kind of bubbled to the top. So we'd be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Board members? Anna?
Hi. Thank you guys for that information, and thank you to the public for the great comments that you've had as well. You know, I want to know what's this required versus optional public benefit? Who came up with it? How did you guys determine what it was? And when we had small group meetings, we talked about specifically with Councilmember Wharton and Councilmember Mendenhall about open space, meaning a park, and that it's not an option anymore. So would you explain to us and the public
Sure.
how the mayor or the executive director decided on what required or optional?
Yes, thank you for the question. The distinction between required and optional requirements comes back to when we first started the conversation of potentially tearing down the theater and doing a development on this site. We started looking at what other public benefits the agency typically would like to see from a project, especially a project of what would be this significance and this magnitude, not just in the downtown area, but for the loss of the theater. And that we came up from that conversations both internally and with the administration, as well as somewhat of a factor of reaching out to council members in our small group meetings, is to prioritize what we felt those public benefits would be in lieu of the theater. And from there, we broke it down to what were the top three, which became the required benefits, as well as the ones that were either additional or enhancements to those required benefits. And so the required ones being the affordable housing, the mid-block walkway, which is something that in most other areas within the city is mandated within the master plan, as well as the concept of preserving some of the elements and making sure those are provided for and restored within the next development. Those we felt were absolutely required, something that we'd want to see out of this project. Then there were the optional benefits of either expanding the amount of affordable housing or expanding the open space, as well as the concept of potentially having a use within the project that either could provide a public benefit or something that we would like to see downtown as an activity. None of those were really as defined as the required ones, and so that's one of the reasons that we left those as optional, because they were going to be more based on the fact of how the design came about and or to what extent we may need to seek additional participation by the agency. So with regard to your question on the open space, the developer has proposed from day one that there would be open space within this project. And the question has been, to what extent is that open space primarily an amenity that is owned and maintained and managed by the developer, versus to what extent we as an agency and a city would want to see that as a true public use and benefit that we either could help with participating additional funds for the enhanced version of that open space, as well as potentially the ongoing maintenance of that. So that is why we put that as an optional element. We fully anticipate that and assume that the developer is going to provide that open space. And the question before us is simply, to what extent is that designed, activated, and maintained? And that is why that one fell into an optional. So the developer understands from the conversations both with us and the administration and council members that this council wants to see open space in the project, and we've just certainly said that that'll be an ongoing discussion and negotiation of what that looks like.
I'm just not comfortable, like I saw that agreement and that it's not written there. And so I'm just not comfortable with that not being there, as downtown needs a new park. We don't have the funds for a new park, so this would have been a good opportunity. And then on top of this one, I had another question. Is there a right of reverter in this agreement, meaning that if these benefits, so-called benefits, don't happen, then we get the property back?
Another great question. The right of reverter usually is not something that is put into the purchase and sale agreement always, as much as within the development agreement. As we really finalize the design and the details of the development, that is where we would have that right of reverter, to the extent that either the agency would always have the right to step in and take over the project, and or we would have the first opportunity to buy the property back if it went into foreclosure. And that's usually just a function of the negotiation between the agency, the developer, and usually their lender in terms of what everyone's comfortable with. But that is something that we also have in our State Street project that we typically just build into that development agreement.
Last question I have, sorry to take so long. Can you tell us and the public about the process, how the process is that the executive director has the right to sell this property without much of our input? And then if the executive director ever considered the preservation of it or this bond option?
Sure. So similar to the city structure, the mayor, acting as the executive director of the agency, has the administrative functions, which include the disposition of property. And that is something that is within her purview. And the agency has a land disposition policy that goes on top of that as well, that we have to follow in terms of what the board has decided is our policy and under which conditions the mayor, acting as the executive director, can sell that property. So to the extent that this would be just a straight up land disposition with no consideration for a write down, then the mayor has full authority to do that under that policy. The fact that as part of doing that, the mayor has wanted to include additional public benefits, and understanding that the impact of those benefits on the cost of the project is more than what is 10% of the land value, according to RDA policy, that then kicks it to a decision by the RDA board. So if those restrictive elements were not on the property, and if we were selling this property just for straight up market value, then the mayor has the full authority to do that without that ever needing to come back to the board. We structured this in a way such that we knew that in order to sell the property, we wanted to get additional public benefits out of it. So we anticipated from the beginning that those benefits would have an impact on the budget of more than 10% or $4 million. And so we anticipated that we would need to come back to the board for approval of whether you as a board wanted to provide an offset to that purchase price for the developer to include those public benefits. I should note that this is not corporate welfare. This is not the developer coming to us asking for money to make this project happen. I suspect that Heinz would be just as happy, and Joel LaSalle would be just as happy to buy this at market rate and build the project that they would like to build. This is coming from us as an agency saying that we would like to see public benefits happen on this property. And I think obviously based on the comment regarding open space that there's probably a discussion there of what those priorities are and what those public benefits should be. And so the fact that we anticipate that the cost of those benefits is such that we need to come back to the board and have that conversation and make sure that you approve that we are going to write down the property to get those benefits in the process. With respect to your question on bonding, bonding has been a topic of conversation for this property as long as I've been back at the agency, over 2 years, as well as before, in terms of looking at ways to finance this. The costs are significant, and I know there's a lot of question as to how much we have vetted those costs or how we're misstating those costs or the fact that there's a range. And that is all subject to the fact that there is a question of to what level you preserve or restore the theater, to what level you rebuild it, and to what level you have to build out the space for whatever end user you have. And so that's why we've always presented those costs as a range, because there's a lot of discrepancy in what you would ultimately build and how much that would cost, as well as what the associated seismic costs would be for each project. And so we're looking at a range of, $45+ million of what we anticipate to be a restoration, seismic upgrade, and potential build out at some level of the project. So the reason we looked at the bonding capacity is because to carry a $45+ million bond would eat up every dollar of tax increment available within the CBD project area. And I will tell you, as the Chief Operating Officer of the Redevelopment Agency, I would not recommend that we do that. And so the question that I think really needs to be asked is, as part of the public process that is being asked for, as a city council, would you want to consider the idea of doing somewhere between a $50 and $75 million public bond for a building in your downtown area? The mayor, as we presented this information to you, said that given the fact that we had just done a sales tax increase and we had just issued a bond for the road and infrastructure improvements, she did not feel that this met within the priority of what public funds should be spent on, and she was not interested in issuing debt. So we're at the point as RDA staff saying we don't have a way to finance this project. And therefore, we feel that the best path forward, given that we've been looking at this property for 10+ years, is to move on to the next development.
Danny, I have some follow-up questions on that, just to clarify. So you were talking about the bonding. We as a board can't issue debt without the mayor on board, right? And this
Right.
might go to Jen, but so we could not unilaterally make that decision.
Correct. Yeah, that would have to be initiated from the mayor, and that was the decision the mayor made that factored into her decision to sell the property.
And at this point, I mean, just sort of layman's terms, because I think sometimes you talk in RDA terms and not in like layman's terms. At this point, my understanding is the board is, the question to the board is about the land write-down itself. That's it. The purchase and sale agreement is not an executive or board function. That is an administrative function.
Mm-hmm.
And so the question is about the public benefits and whether or not that those public benefits add up to a land write-down.
Madam Chair, if I may, I think it's important to call out that in quantifying the cost associated with the public benefits, the cost is above and beyond the value of the land currently.
Okay.
So.
Yes, but to answer your question, you're absolutely right. The board is being asked to consider, in light of the public benefits and the costs, do they approve writing down the property at that level?
Okay. Are there other questions from board members? I know that one of our board members who couldn't be here was mentioning about should the board approve the land write-down, that one of the things that we would like to, and that he would like to see, and I would agree, is to come back with some sort of proposal to do a third-party document historic element, documentarian to document all of the historic elements, and that we'd want a budget proposal for that for a third-party person to really make sure that should this go forward, we are doing the best we can to preserve what's in there through documentation. So I would encourage the RDA staff to look at some sort of proposal for future after any action is taken on this.
And that is something, I'm sorry to interrupt, that is something we're willing to commit to. I think prior to the board possibly taking action, I don't know if we would have the full scope, but I think what we can commit to is doing that, and to the extent that that exceeds what we may not be able to carry within our existing professional services line item and or the $1 million that would be set aside for that, that if the cost was significant enough, then obviously we would come back for a budget amendment to carry that. But I think it's safe to say we would commit to that right away.
And just to that notion, if we're looking, and I don't, just as you kind of think about this, going back to some of the open space in the park, I would be interested in maybe talking to public services about what is the city's impact would be if maintaining public park space, open space in that area. Should that be something that's on the table for discussion? Andrew had something?
Yeah, Madam Chair. Thanks for this presentation again. A question about the November contract deadline. Explain the details of that, please, if you wouldn't mind.
The question on the contract deadline came about of the previous contract that is part of the due diligence and finalizing those terms and moving into closing on the property. That's a deadline that we had. It was actually last November, but then we had a year to basically work towards closing. As we got to the point where we were looking at moving forward with developing the site that did not anticipate preserving the theater, those conversations quickly led to where we would just enter into essentially a new agreement. The previous agreement was an exclusive negotiations agreement, which we as an agency working with legal counsel don't necessarily prefer to do those anymore as much as just work right into a purchase and sale agreement. So where we felt we were not only changing kind of the scope of the development and where the project was headed with the property owners, as well as either amending the E&A versus a new agreement, we just opted to negotiate and move into a new purchase and sale agreement.
Okay. Madam Chair, I don't have a question, but I have a statement, if that's okay. I'm struggling with this one, Danny. I know we've talked a couple times about it, and rationally I can't find a reason to not go through with the sale or support it. The problem I'm having right now is the public benefit doesn't seem to outweigh some specific geographic, arts and cultural, historical issues that aren't able to be replicated anywhere else in the city.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have an answer to how you pay for it. And I think the public, I'd like to restate this again for the public. For the city to do this, it will hamstring us, our ability to do anything else bonding-wise for the city till...
Well, if it's an RDA bond, you're tapped out of everything. City-wise, I can't speak to what the city's bonding capacity is. But
for the RDA.
RDA, you would not have any money to do anything until 2040 within the CBD project area.
Okay. I want to say that very specific because there's trade-offs here. I'm inclined right now to not support the sale and ask the mayor to not go forward with the sale at this current time. But that's a personal opinion, and that is a recommendation to somebody else who doesn't need to listen to my advice, frankly. I say that knowing very well I don't have an answer to this. And I've met with several people in the public, and I do get a lot of people saying there are prominent people who would support or prominent names being put forward, and I'm glad they're not putting it in the public sphere here in the public meeting because no one wants to be bound to these things. However, the time has passed for generalizations. If the public is very supportive of this, we need more concrete concepts and ideas and specifics. I cannot vote to hamstring the city this way without some more support. Public support is great, but we need money. So I got to put that out there right now. There's some trade-offs to be made very quickly on this. So that's my request to the public at this point. If there is concrete specifics that can be brought forward now it's got to happen now. If there's not, if it's an information issue, we got to talk through this. Let's do that on meetings as much as we possibly can right now to get the costs and benefits laid out there for everybody. I want to push back against the fact this is behind closed doors. The first tour I took when I got in the city council 4 years ago was the Utah Theater. What we just saw up there was since 2010, this has been a discussion. It's been a frustration from a lot of people before me and probably currently on this board. It's not quiet. It's not hidden in any way. It's hard to keep track of everything in the city. But it's been a lot of time running the numbers, and the RDA team has done a great job trying to pursue every possible avenue at this point. If there's something new, you got to hear about it now. Okay? So, Madam Chair, that's where I stand at this point. And I'll put it out there, unless something else changes my mind, I would strongly hope the mayor would forward stall a little bit, perhaps, and wait a bit.
I agree with Councilmember Johnston. I want to exhaust every single option that we have that could be out there because of that compelling argument about Penn Station and what happened. I mean, it's in documentaries out there. When planning school, we look at these things and how did this happen? So we are at this point where we can actually take a look at it. Hopefully the outcome is different, but yes, like Andrew said, we don't have all the money to do this. And as much as we would love to, and as much as a little preservationist in my heart I am as a city planner, we need your help. Come back with concrete plans, and please talk to the mayor, the elect one and then the current one, to see if there's anything we can do about it. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
I guess I'm the opposite. I'm actually comfortable moving forward with this project. The reason being is that these photos that we've got here do not depict what is currently there. I've been through the building twice. It's a shame in its current state. I think it would be amazing to try and save it, but for me, it doesn't pencil out. And that's really what it comes down to, is penciling out. And you can see that we would tie ourselves in the CBD district moving forward, which I can't do. Hamstring, a future board that's coming on. So for me, as a board member, as a city council member moving forward, I've heard it now from 2 different administrations trying to get something done, and nothing has happened. I mean, you look at the state of a lot of our stuff, the Fisher Mansion, the Fleet Block, the list goes on and on. Here we are, where we have something that is tangible, ready to go, and is an improvement to what the current situation is. I mean, I'm all for saving the clock tower like in Back to the Future, but there's no way we're going to be able to do that currently in its current state. So,
Charlie, anything over there?
Nope, we're not scheduled to take action today, so
Nope.
You have a month.
And with that, I think that one of the things I just want to say, I sort of agree with everybody at the table in the sense that this is a really hard and has been a hard discussion. And I will tell you this, the very first door I walked in besides City Hall when I was elected was the Utah Theater. And because this has been on the radar for a very long time and has been here in the laps of the elected officials that have come before me for a very long time. And I walked into the doors and I looked at Danny and I said, we're doing everything possible to preserve this. And then I kept going. And it is heartbreaking what has happened on the inside of that building. It is heartbreaking to see that years and years before, and not just because of the city's actions, but because of actions of people before all that I was even here, did things to the Utah Theater that made it so that it became into the disrepair that it is. And that when the city bought it and had intent to restore it, it was in looking at every single option of how to do this. But Andrew's absolutely right. This takes money. And so does fixing our roads, and so does making sure that people don't freeze, and so does all of the other things that we have the responsibility and the charge with taking care of as elected officials. And this is very difficult and is hard to do. That being said, it's also not really up to the board of whether or not we sell land. And there are a lot of pieces at play here. And I want to say that I appreciate everybody's sentiment to this and how difficult this is for everyone. And I know, having worked with this RDA staff, I don't know anything about anyone before or what staffs happened before. I know what I know from the day I walked in here. I know how hard this staff has worked at every single option and has worked in looking at how do we do and what do we do and how can we make this something for everybody, something people can enjoy, whether even if we can't save it, how can we do something that people can be a part of and can enjoy in our city. And so I want to say thank you to our staff for working endlessly and tirelessly, and every time one of us come up with another idea or have another crazy option, or can we look at this, you do, and I appreciate that. This is scheduled for December again, I think. We haven't noticed it yet, but we're likely going to have two RDA meetings in December. That'll get noticed out for everybody who's interested in it. But if there's nothing more, I think we need to move on to another agenda item. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
So, Danny, are you just going to stay at the table with us?
I would love to.
Thank you. That's what I was looking for. Oh, yeah. We are going to go to the 9th South Streetscape improvements and electrical undergrounding. Whew, I can't talk.
I think we can turn it off.
Okay.
Okay, before you start, I just have one other thing to say to my board members. We need to be wrapped up by 2:15. So I recognize that there is a lot. We've talked about the 900 South Streetscape thing, the project, this 9th Central project for a while. If you have other questions that maybe have kind of been answered, I just want us to be aware that we need to stop at 2:15. We have a very, very, very big city council agenda with very important items on it. And there are still a couple more agenda items here. So please keep that in mind when we're talking about comments. With that, G-O, let me hear you say go, Danny.
Go.
Yes, I just did a cheer.
A quick introduction, Madam Chair. The board appropriated $1.3 million back in April for the Central 9th Streetscape improvements and electrical undergrounding. The funding was contingent upon the RDA staff returning with a maintenance funding plan. And at the time, a special assessment area was identified as one of the funding mechanisms for maintenance. The project designs are currently at approximately 50%. The total construction budget is just over $7.5 million, and this fully funds, based on current cost estimates, the streetscape improvements, the electrical undergrounding, as well as CIP funding for the 9-line trail, which goes right through this project area. There are updated maintenance cost estimates, which are currently $44,307. This is a little over $12,000 less than the last estimate in the spring, which was $56,000. The maintenance is for landscaping, primarily planter beds and the irrigation they require, hardscape maintenance, and then a contingency because you never know what might come up. The RDA staff reached out to the property owners of Central 9th. They also calculated the cost for a special assessment area and SAA. Based on the $44,000 annual maintenance estimate, this would be about $20.69 per linear foot of property frontage, and that would be about $2,800 annually for the average property owner in the business district. Some of the feedback they heard from the property owners is that the neighborhood is in transition and it is currently more susceptible to financial risks than it would be in future years when it's more stabilized and when it's grown and there are more properties and a wider base upon which to spread the maintenance expenses. They currently do not think that an SAA would reach the level of support, and I believe it's 61% is needed for an SAA to be successful. If 40% of the property owners do not support, it does not proceed. There are several maintenance funding options for the board to consider. You could have project scope reductions. So if you don't want to pay for the maintenance, you don't have to build the amenity that requires the maintenance. The RDA could pay for some or all of the maintenance. However, this would likely need to come out of Program Income Fund, which is the agency's most flexible dollars. And this is because the West Temple Gateway project area is now expired, so it's not bringing in tax increment that could pay for this annual maintenance. Another option is to split or phase the funding for maintenance between the RDA and the general fund. There are several configurations and timelines upon which that could happen. And you could also decide to move forward with the SAA process, see how it unfolds, if it is or is not successful. And the SAA does not need to fully charge for the annual maintenance costs. It can be less than the total amount as well. The project is part of a larger consolidation of 10 projects along 900 South that stretches most of the city. These include the Public Utilities Department, the Community and Neighborhoods Department, as well as the RDA. The project consolidation does result in a slight delay to the construction of this project, but there are several benefits that are intended from the consolidation, including a higher quality finished project, more seamless integration of the different street improvements along 900 South, less disruption to the surrounding residents and businesses, and building upon the existing engagement and design work that's already been done. And it's expected to be more efficient and cost less by doing these 10 projects together instead of doing them one by one over more years. There are 3 policy questions on page 2 of the staff report about which maintenance option is preferable. You do not need to make a decision today. There is sufficient funding for design of the project to continue if the board wants to continue the discussion next month or at a later date. Another policy question is if you'd like to hear more on the feedback from discussions with property owners, to elaborate on that, as well as if additional calculations and methodologies were used. Per linear foot of property frontage is not the only way to calculate an assessment for an SAA. You could also look at property type, the site type, the property valuation, or the distance, such as a core versus an edge model that some of you saw at the Nicollet Mall in Minneapolis. And the last policy question is about snow removal in the city. At one point, snow removal was contemplated as part of this project, and there was a significant annual maintenance cost for that. It has since been removed. But since this project prompted the policy discussion, we included attachment 1, which is a summary of where the city does provide snow removal, and it includes maps, locations, and summary information. There's not currently a policy guiding where the city provides snow removal. It's more of an ad hoc service that's currently provided. And if the board would be interested, this seems like a council discussion, considering Public Services provides the snow removal.
Thank you, Ben. I have just a couple of things to say, but I will hold them till everyone else has said the things they want to say. Anybody?
Question on the
Yeah.
SAA one. Did you say, Ben, that it could be partial, like it doesn't have to be necessarily from the property owners or business owners, but it could be half the city, half the RDA, half them?
That is correct.
Okay.
The SAA could be anything less than 100% of the maintenance cost, and then the remaining funding could be from the city and or the RDA. It could be shared multiple ways.
Thanks.
Madam Chair, I know that you said that the design could go forward without a decision on paying for ongoing maintenance. I'm concerned that the design may be a major part of the ongoing maintenance discussion, and doing it without that discussion is going to be problematic potentially. Is that reasonable to say, or am I off base?
Court's best to answer that.
Yeah, let me take a crack at that. So we're at 50% design now, and the design for the rest of the corridor kind of needs to catch up to that point. And so I don't think we're making any decisions today that affect the design so much.
I've got to follow up to that. But in our staff report, didn't it say something about meeting with community members, stating that if we were going to look at doing things, instead of open green space, you plant city trees in the park strip. So, I mean, there are things that would change how the SAA would be affiliated or how it actually is designed, if I'm not correct.
The design as it stands right now reflects what the community has sort of requested and asked for, which is street trees, traffic calming, and maximizing as much parking as we can get. And so the maintenance figures, as you've seen, the $44,000 annually reflect the maintenance cost for doing that. So I feel like if we were to change the design, we would be changing what the community has asked for in the project.
And I can follow up on that too, Court, if you don't mind. We met with property owners 2 weeks ago, a week and a half ago, something like that. And those were the three big concerns that came out. More parking, the angled parking sort of in the middle of the street, if you will, in the center. Some trees were very important, and some park benches. Did we talk
Traffic
park benches?
calming.
Traffic calming. There we go. And so those were the three things that when very candidly we sat down and said, what are your priorities and what is important to you? That's what came out in our discussion. So that's where we're at there.
I'm not opposed to the city taking a role in helping with, especially a fledgling area, get on its feet and paying for things while it grows. I am concerned about that being the thing going forward, though. So is there any discussion about how do you phase that out? If the RDA or the general fund paid for maintenance for a couple of years or whatever threshold we decided, and it went to an SAA or something like that, has that been a part of the discussion?
That was not contemplated in the transmittal that I recall. I'm not sure if it's been discussed with the property owners, though.
Okay. I just put that out there. Like I said, I don't want to see nothing done there, but even some is a lot of payment long-term for us. And unless we have a city-wide sort of commitment discussion to sharing the cost of this across the entire city in all neighborhoods, I think it's got to be a little more localized, and there's got to be some discussion about how much a local area will pay for some of this.
There was some discussion, not exactly to your point, but related, that if there were to be any additional amenities or services, that the business owners, the business district would be responsible for paying for those and maintaining and purchasing them. So if they wanted to do snow removal, if they wanted to do trash can receptacles and recycling, if they wanted to do enhanced lighting, decorative lighting, that is not something that the city would contemplate. And Council or Board Member Wharton mentioned the idea of memorializing this in a resolution if there was support among the board. It might be better to discuss that when he's here. But he had some similar thoughts about where to draw the line of maintenance. Mm-hmm. And in terms of when the maintenance, when the city would stop paying or the RDA would stop paying for the maintenance, it's kind of forced by the life of the amenities. When the amenities are needing to be replaced, or when the amenities...
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
Okay. I saw you teeing up.
No, sorry.
But at a certain point, you can't maintain them anymore. They would have to be replaced.
And just to share the kind of political reality is that once a neighborhood has an amenity, I haven't seen a council yet say, too bad it's reached its useful life, we can take it out now. It's usually replaced, and that cost is usually borne by the city or the neighborhood.
And to that point, 9th and 9th East had that situation a few years ago when their benches and light poles were deteriorating.
I mean, that's my exact concern, is that whatever we start now is probably going to go forward. I mean, I don't want to be the person who goes in and says no more trees and park benches for you. But we also know very clearly that we haven't paid for these things across the city. We just haven't. We still don't have a plan for it. So at some point we have to have a plan in place, and I don't know that using the general fund is the answer at this point. So I'll put that out there, and I think there's got to be some give and take. I think the snow removal for me is a little different. I see that as snow removal for me is different in the sense that that's a public safety accessibility problem we have across the city. And unless we are going to enforce on property owners across the entire city to do their frontage and consistently do it, I think we need to find a different solution for that particular thing. I'm all for enforcing, frankly, as a pedestrian, but I'm not sure we can do that across the entire city fairly.
I would note also that as part of our conversation with the property owners and the residents in the area, one thing that they brought up is that this area has kind of been the test zone for the form-based zone, which means you have a significant amount of development happening there with zero parking requirements. And one of the biggest things that the property owners have asked for these improvements is for increased parking. And so the perception of the owners is that if the city is going to allow the additional density and to reap the rewards of having that kind of come into the area and realize a higher taxable value and more housing and arguably affordable housing, then this is a small request to make to just provide parking for that business district, which is arguably one of the reasons that this area has kind of become what it is it's become its own identifiable area that this development has come in. And so I put that out there for the property owners because I think that some of them feel that they have been impacted by this zoning, those who have been there a long time, and that everyone seems to agree that this is probably hasn't followed a process that we would like it to follow now for these projects in the future. And so that's, I think, a lot of the sentiment of just simply asking for the city to realize that the benefit of the RDA project area and the zoning, that arguably $40,000 a year is a small price to pay for street trees and parking in the middle of the street. And that comes after they have stepped up and said that they're willing to do their own snow removal and empty any trash cans and acknowledge that if they want any future amenities in the future, they would step up and pay for those. So I think that's an important part of the meeting we had with the stakeholders that probably needs to be added.
Yeah. James?
I was just going to follow up on the phase-in approach. Do we know of any RDAs that do SAA's phase-in approach where the RDA starts off and they do all the maintenance, but as the property values increase because of the infrastructure improvement that's been made, those property owners start buying in while we phase out?
I can answer that because I think what we've seen in the city's experience is more of a sort of practical, maybe human reaction, is that once you have an amenity and someone else is paying for it, it's very difficult for you to sign on and say, yeah, I'll pay for it now. Because really when property values increase, the people who are owning the property with increased value don't typically experience the increased value until they sell their property or until they rent it out for a higher rent. So we found that actually on the North Temple situation. We put in the amenities and then asked for people to help pay for the amenities and maintain them, and they correctly pointed out that we were already paying. So
that's why I'm saying before we even put them in, we talk about a phase approach. So I mean that
what you've just proposed there is what we're proposing for the station center improvements. Is that because the RDA is the majority landowner, put that assessment arguably in right now before we do the work, before we even sell the property, and whoever we sell it to comes in and agrees that they're going to buy it subject to that assessment. So the answer is no, we haven't done it.
But we're looking
these projects, but we're looking at it.
So I'm just going to say something real quick because we're going to move on to the next agenda item. That I'm actually, after going through this over and over again with all of the property owners and looking at the what I'm going to put sort of in air quotes as the amenities they're asking for, I look at I'm in favor of, I would support maintenance coming out of the general fund for this. And the reason I would support that is because I believe that a lot of these property owners, not just the business owners, but the people who have moved into the neighborhood, have done so sort of at their own risk, and these amenities don't seem like a lot to ask for $45,000 a year. And of course, that'll go up over time. But what's going to happen is that these property owners that are there and making their own improvements to their own property, building businesses there, supporting other businesses there, the new tracks line coming in, all of the or not new tracks, but the station, all of those different projects are going to bring extra money into the area. And we as a city can say, well, you sort of did your part. Our part is to maintain these few amenities that you've asked for. Now, mind you, when we first got the project, the maintenance was like $250,000 a year. And that was where I think it was like, ooh, sheesh, how are we going to do that? But working with the property owners, working with RDA staff, having people come and say, what are the priorities, recognizing that what has gone on over there and what needs to happen, and that it has been sort of a forgotten neighborhood for a while. For me, it seems like it's another city responsibility of maintaining the road on 2700 South, right? I mean, it seems like a responsibility that we can take on because of the sort of, I guess, faith, if you will, that the property owners put into the project, the whole project area itself. So just I'm throwing it out there that's where I stand right now. We're not making a decision on this today. Again, we'll probably come back in December and make that decision. So there's plenty of time, i.e. 3 weeks, to continue talking with each other, with the staff, with property owners, whoever you need to talk to figure out wherever you all stand. But with that, I think we're good on that agenda item. Oh.
I don't disagree, Madam Chair, to move on with this, but I also think that it means the haves will continue to have and the have-nots will have not. We put money into a certain area with the tracks line, for instance, and it may just blossom because there's a lot of infrastructure, but parts of the city don't have that, won't ever get it. Sure. So it's just 40,000, but it also means that the equity issue may continue to be a problem across the city in places that we put a lot of infrastructure upgrades versus places that we don't. So that's my only issue with it.
Well, that's certainly opportunities for more discussion on that as we continue different project areas throughout the city. So next agenda item is, we're not going to, it's still not 2 o'clock. Whew, we are making time here. Is our revolving loan fund application, is that right? That's where we're going to turn to? I'm so hot. I'm sweating.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair. I'm Allison Rowland, nominal staff member for this project, which does not have a council staff report to supplement the work that RDA staff has done on this. This is for a request from the revolving loan fund for a loan of just about $2 million. I want to just remind the board before handing it over to RDA staff, one, that this is linked to the budget amendment, as I think was mentioned earlier. This proposed $4.5 million increase in the revolving loan fund would actually be part of what would pay for this loan. Actually, it would be all of what would pay for this loan. It would also pay for other things, yes. And then the second point is regarding a policy question that you may have seen that I sent last week. Essentially, the question is, as you'll see in this project, there's a proposed mid-block walkway. It is, as is RDA policy, proposed to result in a 0.5% reduction in the loan interest rate for this project. And the question that you may want to consider is whether this mid-block walkway, as it is proposed for now, represents a significant enough public amenity to merit that change. That's all I have. Go, Suze.
Thanks. All right. Thanks, Allison. And thank you for the opportunity to present this loan request from Central Ninth Development Partners, who are here in the audience. So if you have any additional questions or any other information that you want from them, I'm sure they'd be happy to answer. And in the interest of time, I was just going to go pretty quickly through this, but if you have questions, just stop me along the way. The project concept is a mixed-use development in the West Temple Gateway project area, so in Central Ninth, as we were just discussing with the previous item. And it is 2 ground floor retail spaces with 3 units of affordable housing above. In summary, the 2 retail spaces on the ground floor total approximately 4,600 square feet of retail space. And the applicants have letter of intents from 2 local tenants who would like to occupy that space. Each of those spaces has outdoor patio and gathering space there on Jefferson Street. There's 3 affordable housing units above that are designed. They're 1-bedroom units, about 600 square feet each, and they would be affordable at 60% of the area median income for an individual. And the project also includes 11 parking spaces west of the building. As was just being discussed in the previous item, parking is at a premium in this area. So that will help get especially employees of the retail spaces off the street parking and allow that for patrons of those spaces. The construction cost is a little over $2.6 million, and the permits are currently pending with the city. The applicant anticipates to break ground in late 2019 if this loan is approved, with a 9-month construction schedule. This is just a site map of the area on Jefferson Street, just south of the existing Central 9th Market building, and just a closer up image of that, this one. Site plan shows the building footprint on the east side, right on Jefferson Street, existing buildings to the north and south, and parking to the west, and then an almost 8-foot walkway that would separate the existing Central 9th Market with the new building. And this is the site plan in 3D from different angles, showing the retail on the ground floor, housing above. So the financial overview, the RDA loan would be a primary loan for this applicant at just over $1.9 million. The property was discounted by the RDA in August of 2018 for $385,000, and the applicant is bringing about 10% of equity commitment of just over $264,000 to the project. The applicant is requesting, as Allison talked about, 6 public benefit interest rate reductions at 0.5% each for a total of 3% discount. Those would be for sustainability, public amenities, architecture and urban design, transit alternatives, economic impact, and affordable housing. And this map here shows a color coding of those public benefits. So the yellow is the walkway, which will have an art component. So it's providing both pedestrian choice in terms of where pedestrians walk, as well as increased permeability in the neighborhood, which is something the RDA generally desires, and then also has a public art component to it. The affordable housing, the economic impact is the local business on the first floor, affordable housing on the second floor. Transit alternatives are employee showers and bike storage and lockers. And then it will be, it's designed to be LEED Silver, so hits the sustainability aspect, and passed a design review process for the RDA for the architecture and urban design public benefit. The term would be a 5-year term with a 5-year extension, which is allowed in the RDA loan policy when affordable housing is part of the design. For collateral, the RDA would have a deed of trust lien recorded in first position, since the RDA would be the primary lender, and then personal guarantees from persons maintaining 20% or more ownership in the LLC. The Finance Committee met in October and recommended approval of this since it complies with the loan policy and no waivers or exceptions are requested.
Okay.
That's everything I have.
Madam Chair, sorry, may I just add one quick point that Susan pointed out to me in an earlier conversation. Just in general, as a reminder, small-scale affordable housing, small-scale housing in general costs more per unit than larger scale, and so that may be worth keeping in mind as well as you're looking at the potential for this loan. Thanks.
Great, thank you. Any questions on this? Huh?
Can you just clarify that statement, Allison? What do you mean when it's more expensive to build this than a higher density unit?
Yeah. I mean, essentially, there are economies of scale in a larger unit, so it's not the density, it's the actual size of the building. So there are economies of scale that aren't realized in a smaller scale development.
Meaning the number of units in the building, not necessarily the size of the units.
Yeah, the question is the trade-off long-term and the affordability? What's the term on this?
I would defer.
I'm trying to remember, but I think we have a 30-year term on the deed restriction.
Yeah.
Oh,
Are
I'm
you
sorry,
asking the
50-year
trade-off for the longer
50-year
loan term?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's for the housing component. The original, I should say not the original, the standard loan term within our loan program is 5 years, and that's more to reflect whether it's a commercial loan to get in, provide the improvements, and get out. For housing, we recognize that the stabilization and the benefit needs to extend beyond just what works for commercial projects. That's why we provide the extension for 10.
So the commercial is 5, the housing is 30?
No, the commercial is 5, housing is 5 with an option for a 10-year
You guys
extension.
are talking about two different things.
The affordability deed restriction is
It's
30
50.
years.
30
It's
years on the
50.
residential.
50.
It's
Sorry.
50.
50 on the residential units. The retail space, is there an affordability piece there, or is
No.
that market?
No, that's
That's
market.
market.
Sorry, we had 3 different topics that we were bouncing around. Thank you.
I'm going to pass the telephone around here in a minute.
All the voices
and
in
we'll
my head
see.
were keeping up, so.
Okay.
If there's nothing further, I'd look for a motion on this. There's motion sheets in your folder.
Yeah, I've got a motion here.
Thanks, Jamesy.
I'm going blind. I move the board adopt the resolution to approve a loan up to $1.997,171 to Central Ninth Development Partners, 2 LLC for a project located at 912 through 916 Jefferson Street.
All right, I have a motion by Board Member Rogers, a second by Board Member Johnston. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? All right, that passes. Great. Our next, now we can finally get to this. Our next item is our budget amendment number 1. This is a public hearing for the budget amendment. It was noticed at 2 o'clock. Do I have any comments about our budget amendment? I don't see any. So with that, I would also look
Madam
for a
Chair?
motion on this. Yes.
I move that the board adopt a resolution amending the fiscal year 2019-2020 final budget of the redevelopment agency as proposed by the administration with the contingencies shown on the motion sheet. Do I need to read the motion? Thank you.
Second.
All right, I have a motion by Board Member Luke, a second by Board Member Rogers. Sorry, Johnston, he was louder.
You don't know which one it is.
Johnston. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, there's that. And the topic that we love, I actually really love it a lot, but I'm really glad that it's on, again, our agenda. The guiding framework, including the RDA mission and values follow-up. I first just want to say, I don't think you need to give us any sort of presentation. Oh, we added some language. We added the sustainability language.
Correct.
That's,
It's the only change.
that's all I want to see.
It was well done, too, those changes, so.
They were well done.
Madam Chair, I move that we adopt the RDA guiding framework, including RDA mission and values.
Do I have a second? All right, I have a motion by Board Member Rogers, a second by Board Member Luke. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Great. I really want to thank all of you guys for all your hard work on that and for putting up with us last month and all of that and making the changes that we wanted to make. So I think with that, we can actually adjourn RDA. We've dealt with all of our business.
We're going to recess as RDA. No, actually.
Because we powered right through it all, y'all. Oh, I do need an approval of minutes for a day that was September 24th and Tuesday, October 8th. Okay, I have a motion by Board Member Luke, a second by Board Member Johnston. All those in favor? Aye. We good? All right, in that case, RDA board meeting is now adjourned.
Thank you.
Okay, so we will. Better turn this on. We're scheduled to convene as the council at 2:30. So, is that right? Okay. Can we meet earlier? Okay. Yeah, let's come back at 2:20. So it'll take 10 minutes.